All right, well, hello and good evening or morning or noon or middle of the night. We have people from Toronto, from Florida, from Belgium. So we have people from all over the world. So your clocks are going to be all over the place as well, I guess. First of all, welcome to this webinar, an introduction to Luminar Neo. The way this is going to be tonight is I've got a couple of slides for you, and then I'll have a demo which will be like a two-part demo. There'll be a 5-minute break somewhere halfway, and before the break I'll mainly talk about Luminar as a standalone application, the whole catalog concept. And I think that even if you plan on using it mostly as a plugin, like I also use it, it still pays to know how to use it as a standalone application, because there are moments where you might actually want to use it as a standalone before importing the results of the standalone use into your Lightroom catalog, for example, but more about that later. So a couple of practicalities. Let me double check. This webinar is being recorded. I got, because of the time, and this is an international webinar, some people like in Australia, as much as they love a webinar by me, they wouldn't get up at 3 a.m. in the morning, which I totally understand. So I'm gonna record this and I'm going to make this available for a limited amount of time. Now, if you have functional questions about Luminar Neo, like can it do this, how do I do that, please feel free to ask them in the chat. However, for technical questions, I'm going to have to refer you to the technical support of Skylum, which is support@skylum.com, for the simple reason that I'm not that much of a techie. The webinar replay will be available until this Sunday, which gives you ample time to watch it again. But the good thing is that later in this webinar, I will show you how to get Luminar Neo for the cheapest possible price. I found a killer deal, which is oddly enough not through Skylum directly. It is the best deal to upgrade as an existing user is through Skylum, but the best deal as a new user is actually not through Skylum. I'm going to show that to you by the end of the webinar. And so if you purchase the upgrade to Luminar, or you purchase Luminar like a fresh copy as a new user, if you either directly through Skylum or through that other source that I'm going to mention later tonight, well, then if you forward me your confirmation, your receipt, whatever, then I'm going to give you a download link so you can actually watch that webinar, this very webinar, whenever you want, how many times you want it. It's yours to watch. Okay, now a couple of things about Luminar Neo. So Luminar Neo is obviously an image editing app, and it's available both as a standalone product and also as a plugin for Lightroom and Photoshop. And in fact, when you purchase Luminar Neo, it does both things at the same time. So you get both functionalities. It's not like you have to choose when you purchase it, oh, I want the standalone version, oh, or I want the plugin version. No, you get both uses, which isn't always, or which hasn't always been the case. Like back in the day, we had Luminar 3 and Luminar Flex. Luminar 3 was a standalone, Luminar Flex was the plugin, which created all kinds of difficult workflows. So I'm very happy that Skylum consolidated all functionalities into one and the same product. So in other words, Neo can work both as an addition to your existing Lightroom and Photoshop workflow, or as sort of an alternative for it. It's one app to not only manage your images, but obviously also to edit them. And the app contains over 25 tools. Now, some of these tools are comparable to Lightroom's tools. Like, for example, Luminar has a thing called Raw Develop, which is almost a spitting image of Lightroom's basic panel. But on the other hand, some are unique, like Relight AI, Portrait Bokeh AI, and especially all the ones with AI in their name, most of those are unique to Luminar. And about half of those 25 tools use artificial intelligence features to quickly speed up things that would otherwise be very time consuming in terms of editing. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that tonight. Okay, then Neo is available as a perpetual license, so the classical license where you just purchase the software and then you can continue to use it until basically your computer refuses to support it anymore because you did an upgrade. But in theory, like if you purchase Luminar Neo now and you don't change your computer and you don't upgrade your operating system, you could continue to use it indefinitely. So that's the perpetual license. It's also available quite recently as a subscription, but personally, I think the subscription isn't good enough value. So I do recommend to buy the standalone, rather the perpetual license. It's a better deal in my opinion. Okay, good. Now, minimum system requirements: Windows 10 version 1909, Mac OS 10.14.6. All right, good. Now I have a question for you guys, which is, do you already use Luminar 4 AI or Neo? And I'm gonna pull up a question. So let me pull up that poll, and it's this one over here. So my question is, which one applies to you? Either I don't use Luminar at all, neither Luminar 4, neither Luminar AI, neither Luminar Neo. Or option 2, I use Luminar 4 or AI, but I don't use Neo yet. Option number 3 is I already use Luminar Neo. So please let me know which applies to you. This will also help me to tailor some of the information in the webinar. Okay, pretty even mix. Like I actually have 40% of you who don't use Luminar at all, so that's interesting. I have about a quarter who say they use Luminar 4 or AI but haven't used Neo yet, and then I have about a third who say that they already use Luminar Neo. So okay, that's good, that's interesting information. All right, good. Now, so for those of you who already use Luminar AI, which is basically like the predecessor to Luminar Neo, Luminar Neo is a different product, right? It installs next to Luminar AI. It doesn't override Luminar AI, which means that your Luminar AI catalog is maintained even when you start to use Luminar Neo. It also means that you could actually use both next to each other, as they are two separate databases basically, but they can refer to the same images, right? So maybe this is a good moment to also tell that Skylum was working on a upgrade tool, so a tool which would let you upgrade a Luminar AI catalog to Luminar Neo format. Now, unfortunately, I don't know what the status is on that. I can only assume that, as some of you may not know, Skylum is actually a Ukrainian company. So they're like managing software, but they're also trying to managing a company that's in a country that's basically at war with Russia. So I'm personally surprised to see that they actually managed to put out updates at the pace that they have been putting out updates. Like the latest update, Mask AI, honestly, with the war going on, I hadn't expected that in like the next couple of months, but they actually released it, I think, 2 weeks ago. But I do think, and that's my personal opinion, that some of the other projects that are probably less of a strategic importance to them, like the catalog upgrade tool, probably got, pushed back a little bit in the list of priorities. That's my take on it. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying I believe that I think it got delayed. That's all. But so you know that, okay? Now, important is that Luminar Neo has almost all the tools that Luminar AI has. There's a couple missing, like Dodge and Burn for the moment isn't available, but there's like a workaround. You can just use basically the raw develop tool for that. There are a number of new tools. There's also layers, or something that looks more like layers like we had in Luminar 4. And definitely is better than the layers or the fake layers that we had in Luminar AI. And also important, there is a totally different processing pipeline. Okay, now, which are the AI-based tools in the Luminar product? So AI means that the computer will help to speed up the process or will even suggest edits for you. Like in the case of Crop AI, it actually uses artificial intelligence to suggest a better, a more pleasing crop. We have enhanced AI, which is, I would say, like for most images in AI, in Luminar AI and Neo, a very good starting point. I use it a lot to like a one-click solution. And the difference with other editors' one-click solutions, like for example Lightroom's or Capture One's, is that the enhanced AI in Luminar actually can look into the image and see what's in there. It can detect like people, it can detect skies, and it does different edits under the hood to all those things that it finds in the image, which is why it gets its AI moniker after it, okay? So like I say, it's an ideal starting point for most images. And it also has a component called Sky Enhancement AI, which tries to improve the existing sky. Not to be confused with Sky AI, which actually lets you put in a completely new sky, and which is still the best sky replacement tool out there. Although Photoshop now also has a sky replacement tool, but Luminar's is still beyond it, ahead of it in terms of what it can do. For example, the one in Luminar also, if there's a water surface, it will also reflect the sky in the water, which is something that Photoshop sky replacement doesn't do. Another new feature actually is the AI spot removal and AI power lines removal tool, also an interesting one. Then we have one of my favorites, which is Structure AI, which increases structure and enhances texture, but it takes it off of the skin of your subject so that your subject doesn't look twice as old when you've increased the structure in your image. Then Atmosphere AI adds realistic haze effects and fog effects to your images. I'm not going to show all of them. Some of them we will see in the live demo, but I just want to quickly go over the fairly impressive list of AI tools that Luminar AI and Neo have. Then we have a couple of, like, basically my opinion on Luminar, whether it's AI or Neo, is if you're a portrait photographer, especially at the deal that I'm going to show you at the end of the webinar, it's a no-brainer to purchase Luminar Neo or AI, or both even. Again, watch the end of the webinar, why I'm saying even both. Because there's 4 tools like Face AI, Body AI, Skin AI, and Portrait Bokeh AI that will make your life as a portrait photographer so much easier. Face AI can deal with, for example, relighting faces in an image, really cool, one I use a lot. Body AI can help to slim people down. I use that a lot less, but some people need it. Then Skin AI is another great one-click solution to automatically clean up skin while maintaining skin detail and pore detail. And then Portrait Bokeh AI is the last introduction that we got in Luminar AI, and it allows you to realistically blur a background in an image. If you've ever tried to do that in Photoshop, you know it's a hell of a lot of work to try and do that realistically, believably. Luminar Neo makes it as easy as dragging a couple of sliders around, okay? Then the new tools that are in Luminar Neo, because so far most of what I said also applies to AI, but we have the AI spot removal and AI power line removal tool, and we have Relight AI, which is another really cool one, because that allows you to separately relight your subject and the background in an image. So if you're like me, I use a lot of flash, but even with my flash sometimes at its most powerful setting, I sometimes have the problem that my background is still too bright and my subject is still too dark. Well, if you want to relight that believably, you have to take into account the depth in the scene. You can't just brighten your subject and darken your background, because then they will look like they have been cut out. So Relight AI lets you relight the foreground and the background separately, but it takes into account the transition zone from foreground to background, and you can manage that, and it's a really cool feature. Okay, and then the latest addition is Mask AI. Mask AI. So, for example, those of you who were on my masking webinar a while ago on Lightroom, you know how much I love the new AI masking features in Lightroom, but Lightroom's only got 2. Lightroom can detect a sky and it can detect a subject, which is fine. I mean, it's fantastic, but Luminar can detect, Luminar Neo can detect up to 9 different categories of things, of selections, which is people and skies that it shares with Lightroom Classic, but then there's also architecture, transportation, flora, water, mountains, natural ground like a field of grass, and what they call man-made ground, like for example a concrete sidewalk or a road or whatever. So if you have a car on a road, it can actually distinguish between the car and the road automatically, and you can give both a different edit without ever having to brush a single mask, and that's pretty impressive. Okay, so that's the new tools. Now the biggest difference is in the editing pipeline, but I actually won't bore you with this slide. I'm just going to show you. So the difference between Neo and AI is in how the edits are applied. And that has some pros and some cons. Like one of the major drawback, or the thing to be aware of with Luminar Neo, is that if you apply an edit, it basically, to speed up the process, Luminar Neo will apply the edit, so to speak, to like a pixelized layer, kind of an in-between temporary layer. And then if you apply another edit, it will actually be applied on top of that previous layer. And so each edit gets calculated as you go, which has the advantage that it speeds up your export. At the end, if you want to export the image, since all the intermediate steps have already been calculated, the export goes a lot faster. Now, the downside is that, for example, if you, in your first step, you would crank up the shadows a lot, and then in your second step, you would, for some reason, which you normally wouldn't do, but you would bring them down again, and in your third edit, you would bring them up again, well, then that would start to show in, because the pixels would be deteriorated. So that's the downside. I mean, it's more of a theoretical downside, but I just want you to be aware of it. The advantage is, like I said, number one, it works faster. In theory, it should work faster. Number two is that you can apply the same tool more than once, which you couldn't do in Luminar AI. So that's the main difference. It's kind of a philosophical, conceptual difference. Okay, so a couple of new things in 106 and 107, which are the latest updates. We can now copy and paste settings. We have presets, and we can create our own presets. We have a histogram, finally. It took some time getting there. We can use Mask AI on layers, and we have the return of the radial and the linear gradient. So now there's 4 ways to use masks in Luminar Neo. We have the brush, which can be either a positive brush, so paint things in, or an eraser, paint things away. Then we have the radial and the graduated filter, which we know from Luminar Neo, and we have the new AI masks. Now, from the corner of my eye, I already saw a comment, and you're right. So one thing that is very obvious and is still missing is the ability to undo your latest edit, which is like in every software application from Microsoft Word to Photoshop, but Command Z on Mac or Control Z on Windows to undo your last thing, whatever you did, is currently not available. I'm not sure why. It looks like a very quintessential thing to be in a software application. I'm sure there's a reason. I also think that, you know, it was in Luminar AI, so I expect it to return to Luminar Neo. I just don't know why it's currently not available. Okay, good. So what else can we expect in Luminar Neo? Well, when they launched Luminar Neo at the end of 2021, they listed all the things that we could expect in Neo, and so far they have delivered upon everything except for one feature which will be coming in one of the future updates, and that is portrait background removal AI. So this will allow you to easily extract a subject from a background and put in or put behind them a different background. Again, if you've done that in Photoshop, although it's gotten easier, it's still not super easy, and you still need a lot of Photoshop skills to pull it off believably. And just like with Sky AI and with Portrait Bokeh AI, I have every belief that the guys at Skylum will make it something that has just the right balance between ease of use and quality of result, right? Okay, let's have a look what else I have here. Okay, if you want to purchase Luminar Neo, like I said, there's a special deal at the end of the webinar. Also, if you want to get the recording of this webinar, like I said, well, if you purchase Luminar Neo using the links that I will show you at the end of the webinar and that I will also email to you in the follow-up emails, and you forward your receipt to my email address, which is info@morethanwords.be, then you'll receive a downloadable copy of the webinar. And then now it's webinar time, but before I do that, I will actually switch and have a look if there's any questions already about what I said so far. Okay, no real questions as of now, so let me switch to my laptop screen here. What I have here is a Luminar Neo catalog, right? Charlene, in the meantime, asks, can you use the layers when you use it as a plugin? Absolutely. So what I have here is Luminar Neo, a catalog, and so like you see, there's 326 images. So if you use it as a standalone, it basically operates like Lightroom, if you know how that works. So we have, on the one hand, we have the images, which are in folders, different folders on our hard drives or on external hard drives. That's also an option. And then we have a catalog. And this catalog, in this case, is like my catalog. If you want to know where it is, you can simply choose File, Catalog, and then Show in Finder. And mine is actually not in its default location, it's on a Dropbox folder, but the default location, I believe, is in your Pictures folder on your computer. It doesn't really matter as long as you know where it is. And so the best proof that this catalog, just like a Lightroom catalog, only holds information about the images. Your actual images are not inside of the catalog, just to be sure. And the best proof of that is, like, I have 326 images here. If I go to my catalog and I choose File, Catalog, Show in Finder, you'll see that my actual catalog is 1.5 megabyte. So it's completely impossible that 1.5 megabyte could encompass 336 images. So that 1.5 megabyte is all the information about the images. How did I edit them? Where are they stored? Did I add flags to them, for example, like a pig flag? Are they in specific albums in my catalog? All that metadata about my images is in the catalog, not the actual images. In fact, the actual images are in different folders scattered around, in this case on my hard drive. For example, this folder, again, if I want to know where it actually is, I right click and I choose Show in Finder, and oh, look, this one is actually here also on Dropbox, but it's on a different folder. And this one here is, I don't know, it's in my downloads folder. So in this case, they're a little bit scattered around the place, which is not a problem because Luminar can track that really easily. Now, how do you actually add images? Because if you start with Luminar, you get a blank, empty catalog. So to add images, there's a couple of ways. Like, you can click on the Add Photos button over here, and then you can point Luminar to a folder containing images. So for example, in this case, I have my, let's go to my Downloads folder, and for example, I have this is a little folder here with some demo images. So let me click on that. I'll click Add. And there we go. It just simply added that folder with images. And just, you know, like a little sneak peek, let's have a look at the edit, because let's have a look at what Mask AI finds in this image. So I'm going to go masking, because I know the first part is a bit boring. It's about the catalog management and stuff. And so for those of you who are already falling asleep, I just want to show you some of the cool stuff we'll get to in the second part. So apparently in this case, it found a sky, it found architecture, it found transport, and it found natural ground, which is pretty much what I'm seeing, right? So the beauty is, like, if I click on transport, look at how beautifully it selected that car. So for example, if I'm like, okay, I want to bring up the shadows in that car a little bit, Boom, no painting, no masking, no nothing. Maybe I want to increase the structure in the building a little bit. Like, okay, no problem. The second time I will use the Mask AI, it'll go a lot faster because it already analyzed the image. So here I can click on architecture. Now in this case, for example, and that's an example, the AI doesn't always get it completely right. But the good thing is, and again, we'll show more examples of that later. This is actually just an impromptu idea of me to show you this little before and after here. So I can tweak an AI mask. If I click here on Mask AI, I reveal the other options and I can erase, like remember I selected the architecture and now I can actually erase some of that. No, I want to erase. So I can erase the part it got wrong. But this still left me with a selection of the building a lot faster than I could have painted it manually. And now in this case, I can, for example, increase the structure on the buildings, right? Maybe I want to desaturate the grass. I don't know. I can go to the color tab, or I can go to the masking. I can select the natural ground and I can desaturate it. As easy as that. So that's just a quick preview of the cool stuff we're going to do in the second half. Now back to my catalog. Remember, I was actually importing images, adding them to my Luminar Neo catalog, but that's just one example. Now there's another way, and actually let me give you, for those of you who want to use it as a standalone, and like I said, there might be reasons, even if you're like a dedicated plugin user like I am, sometimes there might be reasons to use it as a standalone. And then let me give you an example. For example, suppose you're a fashion photographer and or a portrait photographer, and you do senior portraits of like 100 kids or 100 seniors, right? And they all need skin retouching. So Luminar AI has some pretty good skin retouching, but if you use it as a plugin in Lightroom or Photoshop, you would actually have to send one image at a time over from Lightroom to Photoshop and then apply the retouching. You could actually turn it into a preset, but you would in Luminar Neo, but you would still have to send one image over at a time, which for 100 images will take up a lot of your time. So in that case, the better workflow would actually be to start up Luminar Neo as a standalone application, import those 100 images into it, maybe even make a new empty catalog, whatever, because you're not going to use the catalog aspect of it. The reason you want to use it as a standalone is because in a standalone application, you can copy and paste settings. So you can edit one image and then copy and paste those edits onto the 99 other images. Then you can export all 100 of them. And in that case, I would export them in the highest possible image quality, which is a 16-bit TIFF file. And then that export, I would import into my Lightroom catalog. And that would be like my new original file for me to continue working on in Lightroom. So that's why I'm paying quite a lot of attention to the catalog side of things, just because sooner or later, even as a dedicated plugin user, you might need it, okay? Now, this also brings me to the point for everybody who wants to use it as a standalone, whether always or sometimes, file management. So for example, I just showed you how to add images like that were on a hard drive already. But what do you do when you have images that are on a memory card, for example? Unlike Lightroom, Luminar doesn't really let you import images through Luminar like you have with Lightroom. You have the option of copying them with Lightroom and then assigning a place to them in the import dialog. Now, I've been teaching Lightroom for almost 15 years now. In fact, from the year after it came out. I missed Lightroom 1, but I started teaching it right at Lightroom 2, and I think it's like 12 or 13 years. And if there's one thing that I've learned in all those years teaching Lightroom, I know that it's the thing that upsets and trips up most Lightroom users is actually the import dialog. Some people handle it really well, but I know a lot of people who never seem to wrap their head around it. And it's like the guys at Skylum thought, we don't want that to happen. So we're going to keep it as simple as possible. So the best way to import images with Luminar Neo is as follows. So I have a memory card here, actually, and I'm not going to copy all of them. I'm just going to copy a couple of them. So this is from a shoot I did in 21 of February 2021. So what I recommend you do is the following. First of all, I recommend you store your images on an external drive, especially if you're working on a laptop, because otherwise that drive will fill up way too quickly. And just like what I do with my Lightroom drives is I have one dedicated drive, and I call that my Lightroom Photos drive. So like in this case, this Extreme SSD could be that drive. So what I also recommend you do is that you make a top level folder, and you call that, in this case, Luminar Photos. So every time I have a new memory card, a new shoot, I'm going to copy with my Finder or with Explorer, I'm going to copy those images over from Luminar, from the memory card to this folder on this drive. And I'm not going to put them directly in that root level folder. No, I'm going to make a date-based folder, which is basically the same workflow I use in Lightroom, but then I have Lightroom make that folder automatically for me. So in this case, 2021, 0221, so 21 February of 2021. And in there, I'll paste my images. I still need to select them, obviously. So for example, let's just select these here. Okay, I'm not going to do the entire card because it's a card full of GFX 100S files, so it would take forever. Okay, I'm just putting that in there. All right, it's copying it. And now, once I've done that, the way to import this is to click on the little plus icon here next to folders, and I'm just going to add that parent folder. I'm going into my Extreme SSD here, and I'm clicking on the top level folder Luminar Photos, and I click Add Folder. Okay, and you see, even though they were in a subfolder, it has automatically imported, added them basically. It's not really importing, it's just registering where they are. Now the beauty of this approach is the following. Look what happens. On my SD card, I actually have images of another shoot from June 21st. So let me copy a couple of those, like here. And so that's June 1st, 2021. So let me go back to my Luminar Photos. So I'm going to make a new folder here. I'm going to call that 2021 0601, June 1st, 2021. I'm going to paste these in there. And look what happens in Luminar. It's actually already track that folder. Now, for some reason, I actually tried this before going online, and then it already imported them. I think it needs some time to refresh. So let me maybe go over to the edit section, back to catalog. Still not. Let me quit out of it, because when I tried it, it actually did work. There we are. So in this case, I needed to restart it. When I tried it just before, I didn't even need to restart it. But that's the beauty. Once you have a folder that's been added through the plus icon here, Luminar continually scans the folder and its subfolders for new images that are added, which is something that Lightroom actually doesn't do. So the import procedure is actually a lot more user-friendly, I would say, in Luminar Neo. Okay, I don't want to dwell too long on the organizational side of things, but I have to show you a couple of things here. For example, this is what we call the shortcut. So I suggest you organize your images into date-based folders. I've been doing that for 12 years. The reason is, don't get tempted to organize your images into theme-based folders, because sooner or later you're gonna, get conflicting. You're gonna be conflicted as to where you have to put a certain image based on the themes that you created. Just use something that is ambiguous, which is either date or place based, and I think date is generally the easiest. Now, Luminar also, regardless of how you organize your images, Luminar actually shows you your images is in something like a timeline. You see, we have images in this catalog here from 2005 to 2022. So even if you haven't sorted your images, organized them in a date-based structure, still you can find them easily back on the date they were shot through this drop-down list here, right? Okay. Another thing that we have is, and that's actually even more important. So for example, if you want to use Luminar as an alternative to Lightroom, the catalog functionality of Luminar, I have to say, is a lot more limited. No keywording, no star ratings, no color labels. The only thing you have to kind of show whether you like an image or not is the heart icon, this one over here. If you click that or you hit the P key, the shortcut is the same as in Lightroom. It's a P for pick. You actually mark it as a pick and it winds up in your favorites shortcut over here. But that's as simple and as dumbed down as it gets. Now, on the other hand, if you're somebody who says, I've never used star labels or color labels or star ratings in Lightroom, I've never used keywords in Lightroom, then the way that the tools that you have in Luminar to organize your images are probably more than enough, okay? Another thing that you can do is mark an image as a reject, and it's again the same shortcut, it's the X key. If you hit the X key, it'll be grayed out, and then you will have the option here under the filter tools to filter by rejected. And then once you have the rejected ones, you can Command delete or Control delete, click on them, and then they will go into the Luminar trash. And from there, if you right click on that trash, you can choose to empty the trash and then they're gone for good. As long as they're still in the Luminar trash, you can actually put them back if you accidentally put them there. So this brings me to, you have a couple of ways to filter across your images. You can filter across all photos, the favorite ones, the rejected ones, the unmarked ones, and then you can sort by capture time, edit time, and all that stuff. So that's the very basic sorting and filtering options and rating options that you have in Luminar Neo. Now, one thing I'm glad they actually do have, and that's about, I think, the last thing I want to mention before maybe moving over to the editing section, but one cool thing that they do have is albums. And albums is basically the same as a Lightroom collection. So there's no smart collections in Luminar Neo, but there are regular collections called albums. And for those of you who don't know what an album is or a collection in Lightroom, it's a fantastic feature because it lets you rearrange images across the borders of the actual folders that they are in. So suppose if you wouldn't use albums, and suppose, for example, in this case, let me undo my filter here. Suppose I'm with a photo club and I want to do the, there's an exhibition, the end of year exhibition, and I want maybe 5 images. I have room for 5 images to be put on display. So I want to get my 5 best images together. If I weren't using an app like Lightroom or Luminar, I would probably make a new folder on my hard drive. I would call that end of year exhibition. And then I would probably, I would either move images from the actual folders that they are in to that new folder, but then I would break the existing structure because I would move some images, but I wouldn't move others. So that's not a good idea. So I would probably more likely copy the images from the folder that they happen to be in to that new folder exhibition. But then I have them twice, which eats up hard drive space, but also, you know how it goes, right before I have to go to the exhibition, I notice maybe a dust spot. So I'm going to retouch it in the exhibition folder, but then I still have the original version or the unedited version of that same image in that other folder, and I get images that are out of sync. So it's an ordeal. And that's why I love albums, because albums are entirely virtual within Luminar. And how does it work? Well, I can create an album. So the idea is that you can either select the images first, or you can create the album and then select them. But the first image, the image that you actually have selected, will always wind up in the album. So like I'm gonna select one image that I want to be in my album, then I'm gonna click on the plus icon here, and now I can rename this, and let's call this end of year exhibition. All right, so I have one image now in there, and now I can simply add, like, this one was a 2009 image, so it's probably in a 2009 folder. Maybe this one is from 2018. So I can drag it over there, and maybe this one is, I think, 18 or 19. You see? So basically now I have 3 images in this virtual folder called an album that are actually in probably in 3 different folders on my hard drive, but I have them together. And the nice thing is, it is the same images. So for example, if I edit the sky, or if I remove the power line here, in fact, let me have a look at that new tool. Let me, in erase, we have the remove power lines. Boom, gone. How quick was that? You see? So if I now would go to wherever that tool is actually, that image is in the folder, and I can only show it in the Finder. Let me see. It's in my Photoshop for Lightroom users. So this image is in this folder, you see? In this one over here. So it's the same image. The power line is also removed here. It's not a duplicate or a copy or whatever, it's just the same image. So that album only is like a virtual entity within your Luminar catalog that can store images from different sources. And the beauty is that the same image can be in more than one album, which is also a nice thing. And if you delete an image from an album, you only delete it from the album. You don't delete it from any other albums that it is in, nor do you delete it from the actual folder that it is in, nor do you delete it from your Luminar Neo catalog. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. Now again, albums and the whole catalog thing is only there when you use Luminar Neo as a standalone application. If you use it as a plugin, you obviously don't get the album thing. Now, to round this off, and I actually want to show you one more thing that is also important if you're a standalone user. So for example, suppose we edit this image. We worked on the power line. Let's actually put our money where our mouth is, and I told you that I like to use Enhance AI. So let's use Enhance AI, and as you can see, it really does a great job of balancing it brightens the foreground, it darkens the sky a little bit. I could actually emphasize the existing sky a little bit more. One thing I don't like about Enhance AI, but that's a personal taste, for me it oversaturates colors. But that's not a problem. I can easily go into my color section and dial back the saturation some. I can even go into the HSL tool and I can dial back the saturation, for example, of only the blues, like so. So in this case, I kind of edited this image, right? Let me check if it actually, suppose I want to increase the structure on the bus a little bit. So let me go to structure and let me check out which objects it finds. And generally it takes about 10 seconds for the AI to detect everything, only for the first time. It did found transports. Okay, again, it's not a perfect selection of the bus, but I think it's good enough for what we need. After all, our aim is not to like put in a new bus or something, then this selection wouldn't be good enough, but just to limit the effect of the structure AI to the bus, that's actually pretty good. You see, it actually increased the structure a little bit on the mountain range here, but nobody would notice this if they hadn't seen it, change from before to after. So this is before, this is after. You see how easily I was able to increase the structure on the bus. So once I've done all this, so as I said, the difference between AI and Luminar Neo is that every time you apply a tool, it gets added to the edit stack. So we start to remember by erasing the power line. Then we use the Enhance AI. Then I use the color tool. And then I use Structure AI. So every one of these gets calculated on the previous step that's already pre-rendered in the pipeline. That's the difference with Luminar AI. It kind of acts like a mix between how Photoshop works and how Lightroom works. Now, this doesn't mean that I can't change things anymore. For example, suppose I'm thinking like, oh, I overdid it on the desaturation. There is nothing holding me back from clicking on the color tab again, and maybe while I'm in the color tool, I don't see anything that I applied on top of it later, but it will be reapplied once I'm done re-editing this specific step, right? So for example, I can change this from -15 to -10, and then when I click on Structure AI again, that gets calculated on top of my previous intermediary result, so to speak. You see how that works? Now, as I mentioned, an advantage of this is that, like in Luminar AI, when I would go to Structure AI, it would show me the Structure AI settings that I used, because I could only use the tool once. Since I used Structure AI on the bus, and if I want to, I can actually reapply it on the bus or on something completely different. And as you see, the settings are zeroed out again. So I can apply the same tool more than one time, either on my entire image or on parts of the image. For example, if I'm like, I want to apply Structure AI to the sky. Why not? Well, I go into Masking, Mask AI, I click on Sky, and I add Structure AI. And I can actually add a different dose of Structure AI to the sky, then I add it to the bus. And I can do a third instance of Structure AI and add it to the, as Luminar would call it, the natural made ground or the natural ground, right? So now, anyway, this was just to edit an image. Now, final step in the workflow, if you use Luminar as a standalone, you start by importing images. I've shown you how to do it with my recommendations of working with a top-level folder with subfolders based on date, and then copying the images from the memory card over to those subfolders. That's how I recommend you do it. Then you edit an image, like we just did. We actually did 5 edits to this image. And then, obviously, sooner or later, maybe you want to send this image off, you want to put it on Facebook, or you want to put it on Instagram, or you want to send it to a guy who likes buses or whatever as a JPEG. Well, that's where we talk about exporting. And you really have to look closely, because the export icon is over here in the top right corner. So if I click on this, I can choose to, for example, mail it. I can, generally, I just export to disk, and then from there I mail it. So this is where Luminar will make a copy, in this case in the JPEG format. In the color space you tell it to. In the size that you tell it to, you can choose a smaller size if you want to, right? You can say, for example, I want it to be 1200 pixels on the long edge, whatever. And in the location that you tell it to, in the quality that you tell it to. And now if I hit save, this will get exported. So all my edits will be baked into that copy, that JPEG copy, and I can give that to somebody else. Whereas the original in my Luminar catalog, I can still edit and re-edit that at any time. So my original never gets changed. It's all just instructions inside of the Luminar Neo database. John Ball asks, so we have to load all of our photos onto the Neo catalog? Well, that depends. Like, if you want to use it as your one and only image management and editing tool, like I'm, for example, using Lightroom in that capacity. So every image that I shoot, I import into my Lightroom catalog. And then once imported, I make a selection. The really bad ones I delete, and I also delete from disk, so they are no longer in my Lightroom catalog and on my hard drive. But Lightroom to me is my central image editing and management hub. And for some of you, Luminar Neo might fulfill that job. So if that's the idea, then indeed the idea would be that you make one Luminar Neo catalog and you import all your images into that. But that's if you want to use Luminar Neo not only as an editor for your images, but also as the organizational tool for your images, right? And use the benefits of the albums that I've shown you, all right? Okay, if you want to use it as a plugin, obviously, then everything of what I've said up until now, but I've luckily also shown you already a couple of the powerful editing features, but all the management things that I've told you so far, you can kind of disregard because in that case, it's Lightroom who's doing the actual image management for you, right? Now, again, remember, there might be instances where even as a dedicated Lightroom user who normally uses Luminar Neo as a plugin, that you might still want to, from time to time, use it in its catalog capacity. The main reason being that if you use it as a standalone, you can copy and paste edits between images. So, Vincent asks, is it destructive? Well, if you use it as a standalone, it is not destructive because like I could easily close out of Luminar Neo and then come back in here and go back into this image and, for example, a year from now decide that maybe, you know, the enhanced AI, it didn't have to be so much, right? And I then click back on the top step and everything else will be applied on top of that and I can re-export that. So in that sense, it's non-destructive. If you use it as a plugin, and after the break, I will actually show you how I use it as a plugin in Lightroom, then it is so that it's destructive in the sense that if I send an image from Lightroom to Luminar Neo, and I do a bunch of edits, for example, I put in a new sky, and then I save it in Luminar Neo, and it goes back to Lightroom, then that new sky is baked into the copy that Lightroom sent over to Luminar Neo. So if I want to change that sky later on, I can't do that. I have to pick my original file again in Lightroom, send the original back over to Luminar Neo, put in a different sky, and then have saved that result back to Lightroom. That's the reason that for me the best way to use it as a plugin, but I don't know if we'll get around to it, I'll try to squeeze it in, is to actually use it as a smart filter. And I'm not even going to try to explain it right now. I'm just going to try and show it to you after the break. Okay. Second part of the question of Vincent is, can one start editing in Lightroom, then use Luminar as a plugin, and then finally finish the editing in Lightroom? That's perfectly possible. In fact, I'm going to show that to you after the break. So you can send an image from Lightroom to Luminar, for example, to put in a new sky. Then once you hit apply in Luminar, it goes back to Lightroom, and then you can continue to edit it in Lightroom just like any other image. You can crop it, you can add a vignette, you can add a Lightroom preset to it, whatever you want. That's all perfectly possible. And that's actually the way how I generally use it, right? So, as I promised, let's have a look. I'm inside of Lightroom here. Now, one thing you have to know, if you want to use Luminar as a plugin for Lightroom and Photoshop, you'll at least have to open it up one time as a standalone, because the way to install the plugins is actually through the standalone version. So you just fire up your Luminar Neo, and in the Luminar Neo menu you choose install plugins. And by the way, I've been told, because I'm on a Mac here, I've been told that the Windows interface is slightly different. From what I understood, you don't have the top menu in Windows, but you do have like a drop-down list, and if you in the top left corner, and if you click on that, you do get access to these options as well. And it has something to do with the fact that Windows has more tablet and pen machines than Mac does, and for some reason they thought it would be better to do it like that. Now, honestly, I very rarely use the top menu anyway. I just click around on the screen to do my edits. Anyway, so remember that if you want to install the plugins, that you have to do it through the standalone app. Now, I have already done so. Okay, so let me forget about this. I'm in Lightroom now. So, for example, in this case, suppose I want to work on this image here. This is a very old image, and so the way to use Luminar as a plugin from Lightroom is to choose Photo, Edit in, and I'm actually, as I can see, in the Dutch version of Lightroom, so let me quickly change that, because the last webinar I did was in Dutch. Luminar, by the way, is also available in English, in German, in French, in Spanish, if I'm not mistaken, in quite a lot of languages. And it's the same deal. When you want to change a language, you just select that language and you have to restart it. Okay, so I choose Photo, Edit in, and if you have installed the plugin, it will appear in your Edit in list, like it's here as Luminar Neo. Okay, so now what happens in the Lightroom plugin workflow is that Lightroom will make a copy of the original raw file, and any edits I already did up until that point to my raw file will be baked into that copy. So for example, if I cropped my raw file already, like a square crop maybe, then it's the square crop that's going to be sent over to Luminar. For that reason, things like cropping or black and white conversions, I generally don't do at the start. In fact, the only thing I do is maybe minor corrections to the whites or the blacks to have all the possible detail to send over to the plugin. But I won't do major tonal shifts or color correction before I have done whatever I want to do in the plugin, because the more drastic adjustments you do in Lightroom beforehand, the less useful information that Luminar has to work with, right? Okay, so in this case I'll choose TIFF and I'll choose 16-bit and either Adobe or ProPhoto RGB, as these are fairly large color spaces, okay? And I'll choose Edit. Okay, so now Luminar Neo will open, and as you can see, we don't have the catalog section, but for the rest everything is the same. I'm going to skip over the presets and I'm going to go into the Edits tab. And for example, in this case, I'm going to keep it fairly simple for this first one. Suppose I just simply, and actually I could do this with another tool as well, with Relight AI, but I want to keep it simple here. So suppose I want to brighten the kids and I want to darken the rest of the environment. So I'm going to click on Develop, and I'm going to go into Masking, and I'm going to go into Mask AI, and let's see what Luminar finds in the image. It should probably find like a sky and natural ground and some man-made ground probably, and yeah, it found all of that. So it did find the humans, as you can see if I click on it. So now I can go into my adjustments, and for example I can bring up the shadows. I'm going to overdo it, but you see it made a pretty good selection of those kids, right? So something like this. Now remember, the beauty of Luminar Neo is that you can use the same adjustment twice. So let me click away from Develop, and then let me click back on it, and you see my sliders are reset, because now I'm going to apply a new instance of Develop. And for example, now I can apply that new instance to the background and maybe darken that. So I'm going to choose Adjustments, Masking, Mask AI, and I'm going to click on everything else, like in this case, to have everything but the children. Now in this case, it didn't get everything, so if I want to, remember I can tweak the mask a little bit more. I can actually paint a little bit more into the mask. And for example, now I can actually maybe lower the highlights or the exposure slightly. You see? So here at the bottom we have our general, so this is before, this is after. So basically I kind of inverted the lighting, I dialed down the background, I increased the foreground. Now let's have a look, because that road, I actually cycled there. This is the road from the Thai border into Angkor Wat in Cambodia. When I was a lot younger, I did some crazy stuff, including cycling from Thailand to Angkor Wat, and I wanna. This really was a very difficult road to cycle on, as you can imagine. So I want to emphasize it. So again, I'm going to use Structure AI. Now, I only want it on the road. So the easiest way is to check my Mask AI, and I think man-made ground. Look, it's the perfect selection. So I can just increase the structure only of that road. How cool is that? Now finally, just for argument's sake, because I want to show you the way a plugin works in Luminar Neo, or Luminar Neo works as a plugin in Lightroom, let me, just for fun, let me put in a new sky. I don't think it needs it, but you know, just for argument's sake. So I'm going to select the sky, maybe this one. Okay. Look at how well it blends in that new sky with the trees and everything. Okay. Suppose I'm happy with this. Or in fact, no, I'm not happy because I think the sky is too saturated. So again, I could go into my color tool. I could go into masking. I could choose Mask AI, have it select the sky, and then say, okay, I want to desaturate that sky a little bit. I think this matches the tone of the image better. Okay, suppose I'm done now. So the way to apply this is very simply to hit the apply button. Okay, so I'm hitting apply, and this will now be sent back to my Lightroom catalog. In fact, it's already here. So you see, this is the original DNG file. This is the edited file that comes back from Lightroom with the different sky, with the emphasized structure in the road, with the kids a little bit brighter and the background a little bit darker. Now here's the thing. I can still work on this. For example, if now in Lightroom I want to crop this, I can. If in Lightroom I maybe want to throw one of my presets on top of this, like this vintage faded colors one, I can. I can do whatever I want with it. The only thing that I cannot do anymore, suppose I'm thinking, you know, I actually like the original sky better. So there is no way for me to take that edited image back into Luminar Neo and only change the sky. If I want to do that, I basically have to select my original image again, send that over to Luminar Neo again, and then hope I still remember everything I've done to it, and not include the sky swap step. See, but you cannot re-edit it. So that's the downside, so to speak, of using Luminar Neo as a simple plugin in Lightroom. However, and I was actually not planning on showing you guys this, but since you seem to be an enthusiastic audience, I'm going to show it to you anyway. There is a different workflow for Lightroom users, which is to me the ultimate plugin workflow for basically any plugin, and it will deal with that major drawback of not being able to change the settings later on. And I'm going to show it to you in this webinar here. So we're going to edit this image over here, starting from Lightroom. So like in this case, for example, this is also important. Like I said, I generally don't change a lot to my image before I send it over as a plugin to Luminar. But what I do change sometimes is I will hit the J key, and in this case it's, oh, I'm in develop. If I hit the J key, you see everything that is blue is pure black. So if I would send the image over to Luminar like this, then all that is lost information. I can increase the shadows or the blacks in Luminar as much as I want. Everything that's pure black, it will always stay pure black. So if I want to avoid it, if I want to give Luminar the maximum leeway to work with, I have to remedy this at the source. And one of the things I could do, for example, is to increase the shadows a little bit in Lightroom, because that will give Luminar more information to work with. Or I could increase the blacks a little bit. Or I could maybe choose a different camera profile. For example, if I choose Pro Next Standard, it'll also be a softer rendering, right? So that's all the things I can do. Like in this case, I don't even need to increase the shadows this much. Okay, so maybe I want to change the white balance a little bit too. Something like this. Okay, good. Now, remember, we're in Lightroom and we want to do some edits to this using Luminar Neo. I already showed you the simple plugin workflow with its disadvantage that once the image gets back, you can no longer re-edit it in Neo. Okay, so if you want to be able to, if you're a Lightroom user and you want to be able to re-edit your Luminar edits, pay attention. This is what you'll do. And again, this not only goes for Luminar, but this also goes for Nik software. This goes for basically any plugin out there. Most plugins that I know of support this workflow. So rather than choosing Photo, Edit in Luminar, I'm going to choose Photo, Edit in, and then Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. And my Photoshop is also in Dutch, but never mind, we're not going to use Photoshop. Photoshop is just our kind of in-between host application, because from Photoshop, we're going to choose Filter, and that's the same in Dutch or in English, Filter, Skylum Software, Luminar Neo. So we're choosing in Lightroom, we're choosing Photo, Edit in, Open as a Smart Object in Photoshop, all the way at the bottom of the Edit in menu. And then in Photoshop, we choose Filter, Skylum, Luminar Neo. Okay, and then we're in Luminar Neo. It looks exactly the same as we would go directly from Lightroom to Luminar Neo as a plugin in Lightroom. It is exactly the same interface. The difference is going to become clear later. So what do I want to do with this? Well, for example, first of all, I kind of want to darken this corner here a little bit. So one way of doing this would be to go into my edits, to go into raw develop, to choose the masking. I think a linear gradient is just perfect for this job, and I will lower the exposure. You see, like this. This balances this out a little bit more. Then what I also want to do is I want to apply, obviously, some structure. So let's click on Structure AI, and we're going to apply some structure on the whole of the image. But I'm going to apply it in 2 rounds, because I want to add it mostly to our gentleman. So this is like my base level of structure. I'm going to click away from it. I'm going to click on it again. And now I'm going to add some more, but I don't want to add it to the background. I only want to add it to his clothing, right? So I'm going to click on Masking, Mask AI, and let's hope that Mask AI actually finds our subject. It's not a given. I haven't done this actually on this particular image, so I'm discovering it alongside of you all. Click on Human. Okay. There you see. So now what it did, it actually made a brilliant selection of our subject, and that second dose of structure, it only added to our subject, which is exactly what I wanted. And so you can see we now have 1 instance of develop, 2 instances of structure in our edits section. Okay, what else do I want to do? Well, I kind of want to relight the foreground and the background separately, which brings me to this new Relight AI tool, which is, I think, very cool. So it makes a distinction between the brightness of near and the brightness of the far away things. So just see what happens. What it defines as a subject will always be brightened. So for example, you see, it takes a while to kick in, but you see, I can basically relight the foreground and him as a part of the foreground, and I can actually darken the background. And then using the depth slider, I can play with where the fall-off zone between foreground and background takes place. But our subject will always be made brighter or darker, depending on what you chose for brightness near. So this allows me to achieve very realistic results when I change my lighting, you see? So I really can make him stand out like this. Okay, another thing I want to do is maybe add a little bit of a vignette, like so. Okay, and what else can I do? Another tool I really like is the mood, which basically allows you to apply a color lookup table, which is like similar to a color grade in Lightroom. And one of the ones I kind of liked for this image was the Los Angeles one because it gives a little bit of a cooler atmosphere to the image. For example, suppose I want to emphasize the warm-cool balance. What I could actually do, and again I'm just inventing this on the spot here, I could go into my develop tool here, go into color, and then maybe increase the white balance, but only on our subject. So remember, I can mask everything, so I can go into masking here, and I can say that that increase in white balance, that warmer white balance, should only be applied to our human. And this way, I've made him warmer, and the background is cooler, so he immediately jumps more at me. Now I'm overdoing it for argument's sake, but you know, this is just as an idea. Let me see what else they, because I would kind of like to darken the background even more a little bit. So let's see what the masking, maybe it did find architecture, so that's actually a pretty good job of, it's not perfect, but I think it's good enough for what I need. Maybe I'll clean it up a little bit, so I'll go into the brush, click on erase, and maybe paint a little bit away from what it selected too much on him. You know, these masks needn't be perfect either, but like in this case, I can easily darken this a little bit more, you see? It also found the bike, I think, so let me add another instance of develop. And let's have a look at our bicycle transport. Look at how good of a selection of that bike it found. So I would have a hard time selecting that manually. And I actually want to emphasize it a little bit by bringing up the shadows. I think that looks better. And again, I could add the structure. One of the things you can actually do, so suppose I also want to add the structure, some more structure. You can go into the masking tool here, and with mask actions, you can copy a mask, and then you can paint it, or paste it rather, on a different tool. And so I can add some structure to those bikes as well. Okay, now as a final step, I'm not going to be able to cover everything obviously tonight. This is not the end be all end all course to Luminar Neo, but I think as an introduction I'm already showing you some pretty advanced stuff. You can add textures to your image, for example. So I could click on here and I could load a texture, and I'll actually have a look at, for example, one of my own texture packs, which is this one here. Let's take this one, okay? So this can be overlaid here. If I select it, by default it's going to have a 50% opacity. I can increase that to 100, and then if I change the blending mode to something like overlay or soft light, it's going to mix with whatever's underneath. Now, in this case, it's a fairly subtle texture, so you don't see it all that well, but let me add another thing here, and in this case, I'm going to add a negative border. You see, like this one. This is something that I downloaded from the internet, and I want to add that too, and again, I'm just going to add it. So I've done a fairly drastic edit. You see, we started out here, we finished here. And so suppose I am done now, right? So I'm going to click apply, which will bring the image back to the host application, which is, remember, Photoshop, not Lightroom. So I'm waiting for it to calculate. So I have my image in Photoshop now. Now, remember, we started from Lightroom. We want to get back to Lightroom. So the way to get this back into Lightroom is very simply to choose File, Save. Just File, Save. Not Save As, not File, Save in Photoshop. And this will bring my image back into my Lightroom catalog, where I still have the J key on. So if I press that again, I'm good. And there we have our edited TIFF. Okay. Now, suppose I go over this and I'm thinking, you know, I like everything, but I don't like that negative border. I think it doesn't go well with the you know, with the publication I want to use it in or whatever. So if I had done it as a plugin in Lightroom, I would have to do everything all over again and hope to remember that I still knew what I actually did. Obviously, I could crop it in Lightroom, but then I lose valuable image information. Now, what if is there a way to just simply remove that border? Well, there is, because I did the smart filter workflow. So I have to go back into Luminar Neo. Now, pay attention, because if you want to re-edit your edits, then the second time you go to Photoshop, you do not choose Photo Edit in Open as Smart Object. That's the first time you want to apply the filter. If you want to re-edit it, you choose simply Photo Edit in, and you choose Edit in Photoshop. And then you get a second caveat, which is you need to choose in the dialog box here, you need to choose Edit Original. If you choose Edit Original, what happens is that, now in this case Photoshop was still open, but even if you do this like a year from now, it will open up Photoshop with that image, and the only thing you have to do is to double click on the word Luminar Neo in the layers panel here. If you don't see it, then you just simply click on the downward pointing arrow here and it will appear. This is the Smart Filter Luminar Neo. You double click on this, and what will happen is that Luminar Neo will open and it will have all your edit stack still intact. So if it'll take a while probably, and I'm hoping this will actually work. There we go. So if I go into edit, remember we applied 10 edits to this. Because I use the smart filter, the edit session, the information about the edits is stored within the smart filter. And so I can simply go into the edits tab, or actually I don't have to go into the edits tab because it's a layer. I can right click on this layer and I can choose to remove that layer. You know, and everything else stays intact. I can even go into my edits and change stuff around. Maybe like, but these are the edits of this layer. I have to pay attention. I have to select the bottom layer. And maybe I'm saying like, you know what, forget the vignette, I don't like it. Well, I can actually set it back to 0. And then everything else, if I click on the top step again, everything else gets reapplied. And now I can click apply again, which will bring this updated version back into Photoshop. And then in Photoshop, same thing, the only thing I have to do is File, Save, and that will override the previous version in my Lightroom catalog. So that is the ultimate plugin workflow as far as I'm concerned. It's a little bit more complicated, I'll give you that, but it does give you a lot more flexibility in terms of if you ever want to re-edit something. So it's still not as flexible as using Luminar Neo as a standalone application, but it's the next best thing if you want to use it as a plugin. So let me have a look if there are any questions. John asks, can you not create a virtual copy? A virtual copy doesn't really have anything to do in this discussion here, because if I would create a virtual copy, it would still be the same original. I still would not be able to re-edit it. The virtual copy is something that exists within Lightroom to give a different edit to an image within Lightroom, but it doesn't extend to plugins, right? Okay. I want to show you maybe one final before and after. This one here. The first thing I want to do with this image is I want to straighten it, and that's actually something you can do in Luminar. You just have to know where it is. It's in the develop tool, where you wouldn't really expect it, in the transform section, and there you can do a vertical correction like that. Now in this case, this kind of stretched my model a bit too much, so I can correct for that using the aspect slider over here. Okay, another thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this sticker here, so that's something I can do with the erase tool. So I simply need to brush over this, hit erase, and boom, that sticker is gone. Okay, then what I want to do is I want to kind of, and that's again one of the beautiful tools in Luminar Neo that was also already present in Luminar AI, and that is that the portrait bokeh AI. So portrait bokeh AI, what it does is it kind of creates a 3D depth map of your image, and then it allows you to blur the background, but in a photorealistic way. So let's just show you what happens if I increase the amount. And again, I'm going to overdo it. You see, things start to, so the model itself, the subject will always be sharp, but then as we go further into the background, it falls off. It's like I shot this with a f1 lens instead of a f11 lens, right? Now, what I can do here is I have in the background section, I have the depth correction, allows me to bring the point where the fall off starts to happen, to bring it closer. Now, obviously, I can actually put it in front of our model, but this obviously doesn't look real. But I can put it very early on behind the model, or I can decide to push it further backwards, right? So you have all that control. Again, if you want to do this in Photoshop, you not only have to be a master at selecting things, but you also have to create depth maps, and it's a lot more complicated, and it doesn't give you this flexibility of, you know, if you do it in Photoshop and you get it right and you think, oh, you know, I want to put the starting point where the depth starts to fall off a little bit further in the image, you have to start all over again. So this is a lot more user-friendly, okay? So while we're at it, maybe I'm going to add some structure AI. Something like this. And again, this works really well across the image, but it keeps the structure from her face, which is something we don't want, obviously. And another one of my favorites is Relight AI, where I can make her stand out more, and again, make the background even a little bit darker. So basically, I'm using real photographic ideas. You know, the eye goes to the brighter parts of the image first. The eye goes to the sharper parts of the image first. So I'm using this knowledge to deliberately guide the eye of the viewer more to where I want it. The difference is that I'm having the AI in Luminar Neo and in Luminar AI help me by making that process as easy as possible, and that's where I think Luminar really shines. For example, one of the cool, and I'm kind of, you know, this is a tool I rarely use, but in this case I think it's got its merit. It is the sun rays filter. So I can actually put, let me first play, so because this is a flash, so let me put this over here. And so now I can actually simulate rays coming from that flash. I will shorten them a little bit. You see, I can actually do all kind of cool things. I can even warm this up a little bit to make the light look more yellowish, whatever I want. Okay, another tool I really like is the drama slider, the dramatic slider. So again, I'm going to apply a liberal dose of it, but I mainly want it on the background, not on the subject. So this is where my masking can come in handy. So I will click on Mask AI. So I can actually, what I've done now is I've put the effect everywhere but on the model. So let me actually do that again, because it happens fairly quickly. I know. Okay, so let me go into the dramatic tool again. So remember what I said, I wanted to add the drama, but not to my subject, only to everything else but the subject. So I'm going to go into Mask AI, I'm going to select my subject, and then by clicking on Mask AI again, I reveal the mask actions, and I can invert this. So I think earlier on in the webinar I said there wasn't a way to do this. Well, actually, it reminds me there is. So you can invert a component that the AI found. And in this case, I applied it everywhere except on our subject. And I mean, I could go on, but I think you get the idea of how powerful this actually is. As a final quick demo, I want to quickly show you, just because it's so powerful. It was already in Luminar Neo, but where is this one? I just want to show you how quickly you can edit portraits with this. So in the face AI here, no, it's not the face AI, it's the skin AI. So one click gets rid of all or almost all of the skin defects. In Photoshop, I would still be, dotting. And then if I want to smooth that skin, and I'm actually going to overdo it a little bit, but you see, this lets me smooth the skin, but it's still, this is before, this is after, but it still maintains pore detail. So it's not like a super Botoxed Barbie doll. No, it's still realistic, it's still believable. And one of the cool things, and this is the advantage of using this as a standalone application, I can copy the settings here. So I can right click, or I can simply choose Command C on Mac or Control C on Windows, choose one or more different images, do Command V or Control V, and it will apply the edits from that one image to the other image automatically. You see? So this kind of wraps up what I wanted to show you guys about Luminar Neo. Now let me tell you, if you're interested, and where you can actually get it. So if you're an existing Luminar user, Luminar 4 or AI or even Luminar 3, this is, as far as I know, this is the best way to get it. You can click on that link and that will bring you to this page here. And so for existing users, now I'm in euro. If you're from the US, it'll be in dollars. Basically, the upgrade price, if you're an existing AI or Luminar 4 user, is 49 euro or dollars for one seat. If you want 2 seats, so 2 licenses for 2 computers, you click on the 2 seats here and you get, it's 10 euro or dollars extra. The nice thing is that you get an entire app, which is Aurora HDR, for free thrown in. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick to get a free pack of, I think it's presets. Don't click next right away, but move your mouse to the far right or left corner of your screen. Luminar will think that you're gonna leave without buying something, and they wanna grab your attention, and what they'll do is they'll put this up. Get a free gift. So if you click get a gift, which you don't get, which I think is kind of sad in a way, because, it makes me think of, negotiations in markets, like, you have to pretend like you don't want it, pretend that you'll go away, and then the shopkeeper will call you back and will throw in something extra. Basically, it's like that, but on a digital level. So anyway, I discovered this by chance, and I wanted to let you know. So you see this, the nature templates will be added. Now, I didn't talk a lot about templates tonight, but know that they exist. It's just, I'm not a big user of templates in Luminar. I like to create my own, though. That is something different, but we don't have time to explain that. So that's the cheapest way to get it as an existing user. You get Aurora HDR thrown in, and you get, if you do the little trick, you get an extra pack of templates. Now, if you're a new user, and like I think 40 or 50% of you said that you were not using any Luminar yet, and you like what you saw and you want to get Luminar Neo, well, they have a sale, but what I found is actually a better deal, and I'm going to pull that up now. You can purchase, and I found out about this by accident, there is a website called AppSumo, and AppSumo basically scavenges the internet for interesting software deals. It's normally more aimed towards practical office type of software. Like I got a couple of deals with them for AI translation and stuff like that. And so I was surprised to actually find Luminar Neo on there. But what they have is an incredible deal, because for $59, you get 2 seats, 2 licenses of Luminar AI, and 2 licenses of Luminar Neo. So you get basically, you can install it up to 4 computers. So you have 2 Luminar AI, 2 Luminar Neo, and most of you are going to get this deal for the Luminar Neo ones probably. They're exactly the same as the Luminar Neo that you would get directly from Skylum. In fact, what happens is if you buy through this link, you will buy through AppSumo, but AppSumo, so you will get your invoice from AppSumo, you will pay to AppSumo, but AppSumo will basically send you a a voucher or a code or a serial number. I don't know exactly how it works, one of those three, because I already have Luminar Neo, so I didn't go all the way through with the purchase procedure, but I've bought other stuff from them, and it's always the same deal. You get a voucher, or you directly a serial number with which you can then download and install the software from the Skylum website. So it's exactly the same software, it's exactly the same functionality, it's just kind of a different intermediary. And so if you're into, so this is the AppSumo site, and like what is also interesting is if you say, you know, I want more, like if you have more computers, for $118, you can actually get a license of five Luminar AI installations and 5 Luminar Neo installations. But most of you, I think, will only need the single, which is kind of an oddly named. So the single AppSumo deal gives you one license key for 2 installations of Luminar AI and 1 license key for 2 installations of Luminar Neo. So again, that's the cheapest, because if you do it directly from the Skylum site, I think you're looking at $79 or $89, which is still cheap in my opinion, but not as cheap as what I found here. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to say. I don't know how long these deals will last, and that's not like a trick to get you to buy them tonight. I really don't know. Like the summer sale on the Skylum site is probably a couple more days. The AppSumo deal, these deals also are not indefinite. So if you like it, I mean, it's $59. It's not the end of the world, I think. I think it's a better idea to get it sooner rather than later. Anyway, remember, if you purchase either the upgrade or directly the AppSumo deal, just forward me your invoice to info@morethanwords.be, and I will send you a download link to the recording of this webinar so that you can watch it again as much as you like, as many times as you like. Thanks for watching, and I think now I'll have that beer. Bye-bye, and talk later.